Hi, my name is Ross Lajeunesse, and I'm the head of public policy for Google in Asia Pacific. Thank you for being a part of this YouTube Worldview event. Worldview is a monthly series featuring top leaders from around the globe, answering questions submitted and then rated by you, our YouTube users. Some of the notable guests we've featured this year are U.S. President Barack Obama, British Prime Minister David Cameron, and EU Commission President Jose Manuel Barroso. Today, we're excited to be in Manila for our first Worldview interview in Asia with Philippine President Benigno Aquino III. Mr. President, we're delighted and honored to have you join us today.
Thank you, Ross, for having me. Thank you for being the first in Asia. You do our people really proud. Thank you.
Mr. President, we received thousands of questions for you from all over the world. YouTube users then voted for the questions they wanted you to answer, and we'll be asking you the top questions during our time with you today. So let's jump right in and begin with our first question. This was sent in by Ray Ambler. As you know, there are millions of Filipinos working overseas, and Ray's question is about them. He writes, Mr. President, what can you do so that Filipinos will start to work here and for our country instead of migrating and working abroad?
We've been doing so many things on this particular front because that is my first promise to our people. And amongst the things that we are doing is, number one, we're trying to attract investors, both domestic and international. Every time I go abroad, for instance, perhaps two-thirds of the entire mission is spent trying to get the investors to come in. And we have had successes. The most recent is the state visit to China, wherein we got about 1.2 or $1.8 billion worth of new investments that conceivably can become about 11 to 12 billion. There's another, sorry, it's 1.2 that are finished items already, 3.2 that need one or two details that have to be tackled, another $7.9 billion that is forthcoming after that. They're really seriously interested in investing, and they're at the exploratory stage. Now, we are also tackling reforms within the educational system and our Department of Labor and Employment, wherein our DOLE, or the Department of Labor, has a website called PhilJobNet that has something like 50 to 60,000 jobs available but are not being met because of a skills mismatch. So we have tasked the education sector to include that devoted to the vocational aspects, the higher and the basic education, to prepare our students in coordination with the Department of Labor to prepare them for jobs that will be available upon graduation. The system is such that they keep on going after jobs that are currently hot, that are not existent by the time they graduate. So we want to have to end that mismatch between skills and job opportunities. So that is the ultimate goal, that we have 10 million OFWs, or overseas Filipino workers, and we'd want them to be back here. And the way to be able to do that is with the jobs that are available here. So there are also investments in the agricultural sector. And things that when I was a kid were thought of an impossibility. How do you push progress to the countryside? It's already happening. The BPO industry will reach about 640,000 direct jobs this year, produces between 2.5 to 5 jobs for every direct job. And they're venturing into areas in the countryside which have schools, which has the talent that they do need. So it is not it's not a dream, but rather something that is already a reality. Areas that are opening up because of these industries that we're hoping to nurture. The educational sector also is gearing up and has been conducting remedial studies and trainings so that we impart more and more skills higher up on the value chain of the BPO industry.
Do you see the outsourcing industry as a source of future growth for those jobs?
Yes, but not only that. There's also, one thing that has been a dream has also been the manufacturing side, and we're hoping to get that back. And again, utilizing China, there is a manufacturer of vehicles, trucks, heavy equipment that is already setting up. They're looking for a 10,000 hectare, what we call free port zone, similar to those that are afforded other countries in this country, to set up various manufacturing entities. We're already the fourth biggest shipbuilding country in the world. And then, again, we want to go everywhere where there are prospects for our people to have jobs in this country.
This next question, Mr. President, is also about helping Filipinos find good jobs here at home. And it was sent in by Guapoco. And he asks you, what are your plans for the increasing number of street people? How do you intend to get them off the streets and provide them with employment?
We don't agree with that figure of increasing number of street people. The data I have from our Department of Social Welfare and Development says that in the NCR, it's about 5,000 families by the end of 2010. Of that number, at least 1,000 plus of the families have already been brought back to the provinces where they came from. So the number should be decreasing and not increasing. I will also use the anecdotal information when I'm out on the streets traveling here and there. They don't seem to be increasing as far as I'm concerned. But having said that, 1/3 of our budget is devoted to social concerns. And the flagship project for the social concerns aspect is a conditional cash transfer program that seeks to provide a stipend for families in the bottom quintile of our population, those living, and we have about 20% living below the poverty line. The idea is, what is the reality when we got into office? We graduate only about 14% of our population in college. And there are so many reasons why we lose the students along the way. There's almost a 50% drop from from grade school to high school. And we want to redress that situation and address it. And the means to do it is to provide an incentive and an assistance by way of that cash stipend. The conditions are keep your children in school, get them inoculated against the 5 diseases, then you get this monthly stipend.
A direct cash payment?
In direct cash payment. We are targeting 2.3 million families this year. We are already at, I think the exact figure is 2,230,000. And I think we will finish the 2.3, not in December, but by November. They will be enrolled already in this program. We started out with about 800,000 that we inherited.
Okay.
And it is now, again, 2.3, about three times the number. We'll have 3 million of the estimated 4.6 million families by next year.
Okay. Let's move on, Mr. President, to the critical issue of peace and security. This is also our first video question for the President, and it's from Ben of UP Los Baños.
Which should you prioritize for defense? The Mindanao or the Spratlys Islands? If that is too specific for you, Mr. President, what could you say and plan about the overall defense of this country?
Okay. I think the primary issue has to be the peace and order situation in the country. Therefore, assistance to both the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police should be prioritized. Embarking on a campaign for external defense at this point in time, especially relative to the potential threats from countries in our region, is, I think, an unproductive way of utilizing the resources that we do have. Okay, so what are the plans? We have to provide them with the basics, no? But we are for basics not only in terms of equipment but also in terms of morale. For instance, one of the programs that I'm really keen about is this housing program for members of our uniformed services. They spend something like 1/3 of their salary on rental of their housing. Okay. Another 1/3 on meeting their basic needs of food, electricity, etc. And the 1/3 takes care of everything else that's on their table, including education. So we expect them to hold the utmost in terms of professionalism, and at the same time they barely make ends meet. So we instead of spending 1/3, they're now, from the figures are about 3,000 to 5,000 pesos. It is now 200 pesos, not to rent but to own their housing unit. We will finish the program, unfortunately affected by the rains. It will be finished by the first phase is middle January. The first 20,000 units will already be turned over to these beneficiaries. Okay. Having said that, a lot of the equipment is all really ancient relics. For instance, our Navy has something like 132 ships to guard 36,000 nautical miles of coastline. And that does not include the area of the 200-mile exclusive economic zone. So it's quite an impossibility. So towards that end, we've gotten a Hamilton-class cutter from America. We are hoping to get perhaps 1, 2, or 3 more. We were also getting several other patrol craft When we say several, quite a substantial number. Aircraft, helicopters are already in the pipeline, both for the Navy, the Coast Guard, and the Air Force. And we are refurbishing those that are, we have gotten the funds ready for refurbishing those that can still be recommissioned to increase the capabilities. Equipment from force protection equipment to armored vehicles to basic rifles are also being funded now. We have something like 10 billion for the modernization program. But having said all of that, we still have to tackle with the guns and butter approach. And the solution for, we believe, for the rebellions, the secessionist movement when it was still existing, and even the issues of ordinary crime has to deal with achieving the first freedom, which is freedom from hunger. So more opportunities for everybody, more inclusive growth, will see a natural lessening of the issues with regards to peace and order.
This next question, Mr. President, builds upon the last one and is specifically about the situation in Mindanao. Mariano and James ask, Mindanao is an island rich with natural resources, but we haven't been able to tap into this because of security issues. The Moro Islamic Liberation Front has been killing our soldiers while peace talks take place. Isn't it about time we eliminate terrorist groups once and for all?
I don't think I can agree with all the premises that the gentleman wrote, but eliminating the problem is a goal. The methodology is the question. Now, and we believe if you do not tackle the root causes of the problem, then the problem will persist. Now, you can eliminate the personification of this problem right now. But if the situation is such that there is a kid wants to study and the schools do not exist, has to travel on roads that do not exist, does not have any upward mobility, then he will opt out of the system, and we have a new generation of people who would want something better, and that is but natural. So the way to eliminate it is to tackle the root causes. And towards that end, we have identified several billions already of savings from the current budget to start providing them with the basic services that should have been there to begin with. And we will provide the necessary security forces to ensure that the roads that have to be constructed will be constructed. The rural health units are there. There is a mechanism that will review whether or not government services like doctors, midwives, etc. are present or not. And the teachers now. There will no longer be ghost roads leading to ghost schools being taught with ghost teachers that cannot entertain anybody except ghost children. Now, this development will show the people what it can be if government is practicing good governance, and therefore we believe they will opt to reinforce the system, and that will be the holistic solution to addressing the situation.
So you actually see social issues, education, health, infrastructure issues underlying the security concerns, and then underneath those issues, you seem to be talking about corruption and good governance issues as feeding up into those social issues.
Just to emphasize the point, our Commission on Audit, which audits all government expenditure, came out with a report that for the year 2008 and 9, the Office of the Regional Governor had 80% of its budget questioned.
Question meaning?
The technical term is there were findings, which means that they were not given a clean bill of health. Which means that potentially there are a lot of cases that will be filed on that aspect. Initially, they were saying 90%, but when they came out with the final report, it became 80%. This is where they can support with the documents, or actually they can support because of the absence of documents. So I go back. It's a 10 to 12 billion peso budget yearly, and if that is the status quo for it, that 80 to 90% of it is not delivered to the people, then there really is no improvement in their lot in life, and there is no reason to have a stake in the system that is existing there. So if we perpetuate the system, we perpetuate the problem. If we force the dramatic change towards right governance, then there is a hope that there will be changes.
Well, that's certainly been a key element of your administration and one of the priorities for you since taking office. How do you feel that that's going? How are your efforts? Are you getting traction at this point?
I think so. The surveys show it. But more than that, when I started in public service, this was in 1998. This was after the 97 financial crisis. And whenever we would try to find resources for our respective districts, I started as a congressman, the common answer would be, there are no funds. And now, when I asked my Secretary of the Budget, do we have the wherewithal to fund this and to fund that? Then I'll say, if you say so, sir, there are funds. There are substantial savings. In fact, the criticism now is we've been underspending. No? We have not spent enough to, in fact, pump prime the economy. All of the programs that we've done, no? And I'd like to highlight that, has not been the result of increasing taxes. It has partly due to improvement of the tax collection efficiency. But again, part of our promise was we will exhaust that which is afforded to us at this point in time before imposing new burdens to the people. So it's really just a question of not just managing the resources, but really having that mindset that this is the people's money. It has to be down to the people, period. Nobody should be dipping into the trough. And that has had substantial results already. In agriculture, for instance, one of the issues against my predecessor has been called locally the fertilizer scam. Wrong fertilizers, overpriced at that, and not delivered at the end of the day were the main issue. And right now, from a position where we thought we'd have to import at least 1.3 million tons of rice every year, we have reduced that to about 600,000 tons. And in this year, we have had 3/4 already of bumper harvest. And when I was producing the figures, I was talking to my Secretary of Agriculture and I was saying, you know, there are two figures that we use for what are the needs. If you use the Bureau of Agricultural Statistics, which is 31,000 metric tons of rice a day, national need, the National Food Authority says 34,000. Even if we use the 34,000, we will have about 100 days buffer by January, in spite of the typhoons that came in. Mm-hmm. So, in effect, the promise of 2013 of self-sufficiency might even be achieved by 2012. But I'm giving my minister a little leeway and saying, okay, since you promised 2013, we'll hold you to 2013. Okay. So, and it all revolved around basically doing the right thing. And again, back to good governance, not fixing the irrigation systems, marketing arms for upland rice farmers, the seeds that were true and not faked, etc. All of this has already been producing all these results.
Next up, Mr. President, is Jesse from Cavite, who writes, the Ninoy Aquino International Airport has been labeled as the world's worst airport. The airport is named after your late father and is a historical landmark, so I think it's valuable to you personally. What are your plans to improve it?
Valuable to me personally. I agree it's a historical landmark. I know it's a significant place truly for our people, especially the current generation. Now, having said that, personal wants should not be overtaken by the nation's concern. It is a very heavily built-up area. We are almost at the point that it's totally saturated. I think the whole complex is designed for 32 million arrivals or 32 million people that will be utilizing it. And it is now approaching 30 million. Now, it's so built up that it would take a lot of expropriation proceedings, delaying the whole process of getting, for instance, a new target of 10 million tourists into the country. So, it's a 30-year-old structure. It has suffered the ravages of time. There are a plan for it for improving both structurally and aesthetically will be presented to me by Tuesday next week.
Tuesday of next week?
Tuesday next week. Right. But it is not, it will be a stopgap measure for the next 4 or 5 years because we are really looking at alternatives already to that complex, given the fact that it will be, hard-pressed to support the 10 million tourist arrivals that we are targeting. Now, why are we focusing on tourism? It's a low-lying fruit as far as we're concerned. It brings about 1 direct job for every tourist arrival. So, 10 million new jobs is really something that we're striving for.
Very significant. Another question, another transportation question for you, Mr. President, as well as an environmental issue. Will from San Juan submitted this. The jeepney is the most commonly used form of transportation in our country. However, it's also one of the worst contributors of greenhouse gases. Do you have plans to introduce innovations on the jeepney to create a more environmentally friendly transportation system?
Well, for the transport sector, the plan that is most mature will be to convert them to liquefied natural gas or compressed natural gas. And hand in hand with that, is the DOE's soliciting of, issuing of service contracts for a lot of natural gas fields within our territory. That frees us from the vagaries of the Middle East oil situation. So there is that aspect of it. We are seriously monitoring also the pollution levels in all of our cities. And one of the things that we did upon entering office was we have emission testing centers that unfortunately some of them were unscrupulous.
So the centers were there, but no one was using them, or
well, they were issuing certifications that were false, to put it bluntly. I'm trying to remember exactly how many they can do in a day. It's something like doing the time and motion for each machine. It would be something like 30 or so in a given day. Then they were certifying 600 a day. Okay. So when our respective agencies checked on their performance and looked at all of these figures, they closed down. And the closing down resulted in a dramatic decrease of, there's an index, it's micrograms per...
The particulate index,
yes.
Is that it, I think?
Yes. And quite a dramatic drop. I'm sorry, I don't recall the exact figure, but really very substantial. Anyway, if jeepneys use diesel and they are not the most efficient means of transportation, therefore, and they're on the storage cities, there's a big contribution to the pollution because of that. Hence, transfer them to, both for environmental reasons and also for fuel security issues, to LNG or CNG. Then there are also proposals for other vehicles that actually we launched. We have a vehicle called the tricycle. It's normally a motorcycle, petrol-based, that has a sidecar, and several passengers ride it. Now, we have converted them to, we've given new units that are electric tricycles. And the good thing is, it is not only green, but the increase in profitability for the driver operators is very, very dramatic. I think something from a take-home pay of about 250 or so pesos per day to about 450 going electric. So going green becomes more profitable. Buses are already going electric also, or CNG, LNG. And there's even a proposal to have to electrify all of the buses that are plying our streets. So all of this is being done. There's an energy efficiency program being conducted by the DOE. It has a really catchy name, which is issue at this point in time. But that includes also retrofitting a lot of the buildings with better lighting, etc.
So the government is providing financial assistance to allow these operators to either transition to LNG or electricity? Is it direct payments, or how does that work?
It's for the electric tricycles, ADB will be providing us resources to match our program. We're targeting about 100,000 new vehicles, e-tricycles, by next year. Whereas the LNG and CNG issues has more to deal with the storage facilities at this point in time.
You need a whole infrastructure in order to do that.
I forgot the expression, the mother repository, and then the satellite plants that will be servicing it. But eventually we'll be affording them bridge financing to be able to do the conversion. And I think we've done that in several instances already. But there has to be agreement exactly on whether it's CNG or LNG, where the stations are, etc., etc.
Right. The next question was sent in by Kev of Quezon City, and he asks, the Philippines is hit with numerous storms every year. What can citizens do to help the country prepare for these natural calamities?
Well, number one, I think it's the awareness aspect. We are reconfiguring the government TV station, for instance, that will have a weather program that does not just give you the raw data, but actually explains what, why we are tracking it this way, how do we measure the amount of rainfall. Then there's an ongoing hazard mapping project by the Department of Science and Technology that identifies areas most prone to flooding, or flash floods or landslides. We're already at the stage for flooding. We already have these networks that for most of the country will have a minimum of 12 hours warning. For landslides, we are already at the stage of mapping it mathematically because we have sensors that are locally engineered, designed, and put in place that more or less measure the movement of soil. And the mathematical map will be able to help us say that it has reached the threshold for this particular area that the danger of landslides are imminent already. So what can the ordinary citizen do? First is educate yourself. Second is perhaps you could pay attention to us. One of my pet peeves is a lot of our civil defense personnel have to risk their lives unnecessarily because they have to go to various areas where they're evacuating people, not just once. In certain instances, twice, thrice, or in other instances, even 5 times, just to get people to safer locales. So more cooperation really would help.
So when the government asks you to evacuate, please evacuate.
Yes, but we're empowered by a law that says in the interest of protecting our citizens, we can force evacuate them, but we'd rather not implement that. Now, it's a multifaceted issue. If the waters are coming in, they're not well off. All of their assets are in that house that they want to protect. They will designate a member or several members to stay because they want to preserve what they do have. So we're trying to address corrections wherein our police forces are able to prevent looting. We're also proposed a measure that for those that are really poor, that scavenge the equipment that we have on rivers, for instance, or on mountain sides, turning all of this valuable equipment into scrap metal. There's a law that increases the penalties that we're proposing already to Congress.
All right. Now we have another videotaped question for you, Mr. President, and this time it's from a German advocacy group.
President, the European Union, through its EP-JUST program, provided substantial funding in 2010 and 2011 to enhance the capacity and effectiveness of the Philippine criminal justice system in investigating, prosecuting, and bringing to justice the perpetrators of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances. As we understand, one of the hindrances to the effective implementation of the program was the refusal of some Philippine authorities to cooperate and to give full support to the mandate of the program. Impunity still prevails in the Philippines, and next year the EU will be giving another 10 million euro for human rights and justice reform. For many years, international donors have been giving support for reforms in the Philippines, but genuine change needs true buy-in and commitment from the state. How will you ensure to the donors and to your people that this time, under your leadership, all the relevant line agencies and government will move towards justice reform? Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the question. We're trying our best to really reform justice, the judicial system. That actually was the fourth plank, or my last promise or direct promises to our people, which is judicial reform. Towards that end, what are the things that we discovered? For instance, in our country, it takes 6 years to adjudicate any case. And in some of the more controversial cases, they take decades to resolve. Now, when I was a member of the opposition and I was a senator, in the budget for the Department of Justice, I asked if it is true that our conviction rate at that point in time was a paltry 14%. And this was a study funded by the World Bank, done by our Supreme Court. And the answer was in the affirmative. And I said, so 86% get off scot-free. How do prosecutors get promoted and how are they rated as to their performance if they lose 86 times out of 100?
And it takes them 6 years to do it.
It takes them 6 years to do it. And the answer really struck me as the height of, how should I say, a very cavalier attitude, and said, your ability to transfer papers from one desk to the other is actually how you are measured in performance. So under our watch, I have tasked our Secretary of Justice to reform that prosecutorial system wherein convictions have to be the primary criteria of having done your job or not. The idea is, in our system, it's our prosecutors who determine whether or not, they're like an inspecting magistrate. They will determine whether or not to file in the courts, like the district attorneys actually in America, I think would be the perfect example. So determine which cases are solid, which are not. Why clog up the court's time with frivolous cases, and prepare accordingly so that the criminals will go to jail. My oft-repeated admonition to all the sectors that are involved in attaining our judicial reform is simply put, none of our efforts will amount to anything if we are not able to convict anybody. If anybody can commit any crime with impunity, then there is no disincentive to stop from doing so. Hence, there has to be that conviction. the conviction of especially the principals. Now, with regards to extrajudicial killings, that is not a policy of our government in our administration. And to that end, I actually get regular updates, and I ask from our Secretary of Justice and, of course, the Commissioner on Human Rights, the status of the cases that are pending. And they have, I don't have the various statistics with me right now, but bottom line is, I think we can rightfully claim that our police forces in particular, they used to say solved a crime if they've identified suspects. Now, when we say solved a crime, we mean that we have arrested the suspects, filed the necessary information in court, and they are undergoing litigation. So there is no sensational crime, I think, that has occurred in the country under our watch that has not been solved in that manner. That doesn't mean that we have solved everything already or that we have captured everybody, but we are unrelenting. And in various operations that our security forces have to do, the Commission on Human Rights is an able and constant partner in crafting all of the policies and programs precisely to avoid that situation. Having said that, there are other factors in our society that have led to this condition. We are addressing those also.
Next, we have a question from Ian of Manila, and it's also on the theme of justice and transparency. And Ian writes, "Dear Mr. President, you were once quoted as saying that the Freedom of Information Bill may cause widespread panic because of misused information. Don't you agree that Tuwid na Daan needs free access to government info? How do you think the FOI bill should be improved then?"
I was just reading an article in a magazine, a U.S. publication, and it talked about the contributions of Japanese Americans during World War II. And apart from the combat people, they also had linguists that they trained. Now, the funny thing is, while reading the article, and it's very relevant here, it was only 1973 that their efforts were acknowledged. And their participation was kept a secret from World War II up to 1973 when their efforts were recognized. Now, I think the record will show we have not hidden any information from the public. We are adhering, in the absence of a law, adhering to the constitutional provision that the citizens are entitled to information that will affect their decisions. Okay. Having said that, we have been talking to so many stakeholders to define exactly when should the information be released. And let me try to give you a few examples. For instance, if there is a major highway that government wants to build, of course, one of the major costs will be the right-of-way. Should we, at the design stage, already say which route we are going to follow and drive up the price of that land, which ultimately Juan de la Cruz will have to shoulder the burden of? Or would it be better that we acquired this right-of-way at the prevailing prices before announcing in entirety the proposed route? That's just on the practical level. Recently, there's information that comes in raw form. Whilst we are discussing it, should we be telling everybody the raw information that might be changed with further evidence down the line? But in the process, might actually cause a lot of undue concern already. There was an instance recently of a person suspected of having SARS and who had a death in the family, who comes in, and government basically found out when he checked into a hospital. And the process is you go through places that he has gone through, people that he has made contact with. So if this happened in one locality here, should we start announcing it right away? And then have people who had never had any possibility of contact with him think that they already have been exposed to SARS. No? So when I was a kid, I was told, absolute freedom is the greatest actual imprisonment. There has to be some discipline, there has to be some measure. Our system of laws say you have freedom of speech, but the freedom of speech that's a guarantee does not allow you, for instance, to say there's a fire in a movie theater.
That's right.
So the difficulty is actually the devil in the details. So where does it help the interests of the people, not the government, but the people, and where can it inflict harm? So we have to draw the parameters. Even for instance, one example again, sometimes you have reports that are not yet of the level that can be brought to a court, but they're necessary. Let's say a major bank has several clients that have absconded with its funds, but you don't have all of the necessary papers with you. Should the person who is in possession of that knowledge say it in a cabinet meeting subject already to freedom of information. And at the end of the day, without the supporting documents, he's liable for libel, and which will force him to clam up. Then if you are not prepared for the sudden loss of liquidity of that bank, the following day there's a bank run, would that have done our country better? And so these are the details we're trying to come up with, not unilaterally, but talking to all the stakeholders involved, something that will redound to the benefit of the people.
Well, there are always going to be examples when it's not in the interest of the people to reveal certain information. But I assume you believe that the way forward, the direction that things should be moving is generally more information, more of the time. I think under your leadership, the Philippines recently signed up to the Open Government Initiative,
Yes,
for example.
yes.
And so what does your program look like for the next year to help improve access to information?
Instead of promising, why don't I say what we have already done? For instance, in our budget process, we've adopted the zero-based budgeting program. They're on various websites to detail exactly what projects have been approved. But more importantly, we have been engaging civil society in at least 5 of our departments to participate in actually crafting the proposed budget that we submit to Congress. And if that is not transparency in its essence, I don't know what is. None of our government officials are immune from having to answer and address any question propounded by the public. And so I think there are so many aspects that we've already done towards actually putting in practice, enabling our people through information to be able to make better decisions. Now, the only thing lacking, and I think my critics will agree with this, those that are championing freedom of information are saying they don't distrust me that I will reveal everything that has to be revealed. But they're saying that once I am gone, where is their legal backstop that it can continue?
I see. Our next question is from Andy Saw, and Andy asks, what are your plans for the reproductive health bill now that the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines is preventing its passage?
I'm still in support of what we call the responsible parenthood bill. And I think the violent discourse has somewhat toned down. And it is now actually in Congress, in the Senate, debating on the merits of the bill. And I think it is an essential aspect of governance to be able to, again, empower our people by educating them as to their options and providing those that do not have the wherewithal to act upon their decisions. We have a 2-point-something growth rate. And I use this in several instances. The dearth of education in terms of reproductive rights, sexual education, has already given a condition wherein I won't even go that far. I have a member of my security detail who tells me 3 days before enrolling his eldest child in college that it is expensive to enroll a child in college. And I don't say that facetiously. I was really surprised that my answer was something to the fact that you had at least 17 years of raising this kid up before you had to enroll him in college. And this is 3 days before you enroll him is when you find out that it is expensive. And he has 6 or 7 other children that will follow that route. And of course, he has not prepared for that. And what happens if they are not afforded all of these opportunities? So we're not talking about probable problems because of population pressures. We're talking of actual problems that are already now existing. Government's position, basically, under my watch, is educate the people, tell them the range of their choices, leave them to decide on what's best for their family. Forcing them to do one thing or another is not part of the agenda.
We're approaching the end of our time with you, Mr. President, but we have a few more questions, and they're actually a bit lighter than some of the previous ones. Chris Reyes would like to know, if you were to promote one specific destination, activity, and food here in the Philippines, what would it be and why?
If I answer that question, the rest of the people who think they have an equal to or better sides...
That's a no-win question.
But I think as one of the chief promoters for tourism in our country, I can look anybody in there and say you can go to practically any region in this country and there will be sites that made your trip worthwhile. The food, I guarantee, will, if you're adventurous, if you're very conservative, there will be food that it would really enhance your living, having at least tried. And I'm not talking about the exotic stuff. I'm even talking about, when I travel abroad, then of course so many things are so processed. The food that we do have here does seem to me to have a lot more of the natural taste still intact. Then once our transportation network and issues are more addressed, then even the inter-island travel the inter-island transportation of all of this stuff will be greatly enhanced, and will be able to expose more people to the bounties of our country.
Finally, Mr. President, our last question was sent by a 7-year-old boy named Joshua. Joshua sent in a video question, so let's see what he wants to ask the President.
President Noynoy, naniniwala po ba kayo kay Santa Claus? Kung oo, ano pong wish nyo ngayong Pasko?
Siguro, I'm sorry, but I believe in Santa Claus. Santa Claus perhaps as a personification of how people, the best in people, the idea of generosity, the idea of caring, does come out, at least for Christians during this period, most particularly and most, shall we say, strongly. Okay, and if I were to wish on the people who have goodwill towards their fellow men, what would I ask for? Then, more than anything, we really have to shift to those of us still left into the criticize anything and everything phrase, to transforming ourselves into how can we assist our neighbor, our sister, our brother, or whoever, somebody who we don't even know. What can we contribute towards the improvement of the whole? Rather than how do we concentrate on envy, or concentrate on our ability to criticize daily to ad infinitum, that leads to nowhere. And there's the Christmas, perhaps, no? That idea of caring for everybody does not exist only during the Christmas period, but more so is a facet of everyday life. There has to be that looking out rather than looking purely at one's own self-interest. That's the wish.
President Aquino, thank you very much for joining us today and for answering questions directly from YouTube users, both here in the Philippines and from around the world. It was an honor to have you as our first Worldview interview in Asia.
Thank you again, Ross.
I'm Ross Lajeunesse on behalf of YouTube, ABS-CBN News.com, and ANC, the ABS-CBN News channel. Thank you for watching.